One of the most unavoidable realities of being human, perhaps the most unavoidable, is that we're all going to die. And we don't know what comes after. Death is certain, what follows it is not. And that gap, the certainty of the end, the uncertainty of what lies beyond, presses on every life. It forces us to ask, how do you live when you know the story must end, but you cannot know what the last page holds? This isn't only a religious question, though religion tries to answer it. It's something deeper, more fundamental. We exist for a short span of time. We know we will die, and no one, no matter their wisdom, their faith, their science, has returned with certainty about what waits beyond. It is the human condition itself to live while knowing our end, but not our aftermath. Imagine you're preparing for a journey. You need to pack, but you don't know where you're going. Is it the mountains of Appalachia or the deserts of North Africa? Will it be winter or summer? Will the roads be smooth or treacherous? You ask for details, but no one can give them to you. Yet you must pack anyway. You must leave tomorrow. This is, in many ways, the human condition. We're all packing for a journey whose destination we cannot know. Every civilization throughout history has attempted to answer this question. Some built monuments, others developed elaborate philosophies or religious systems. But regardless of how many answers humanity has constructed, the question itself remains. In the 17th century, a French mathematician named Blaise Pascal approached this question in an unusual way. He didn't try to prove God's existence through logic. He didn't present faith as mere comfort. Instead, he framed the entire question as what he called a wager, essentially a bet on how to live when certainty is impossible. Pascal's wager comes with a twist. You don't get to choose whether to play. The bet is already in motion. Whether you notice it or not, you've already set out on the road. Your bags are packed, maybe clumsily, maybe carelessly, but packed all the same. The real question isn't if you're going to travel. You are. The only question is, have you packed what truly matters for the journey ahead? Pascal wasn't trying to prove God. He was doing something else, forcing us to see the oldest of questions in the shape of a wager. Not as an abstract argument in dusty books, but as a choice we carry with us every day. Whether we notice it or not, the bet is already in motion. Every action, every hope, every risk we take is part of it. And the question isn't whether we will play, but whether we are living wisely within the game that has already begun. To understand why Pascal framed things this way, we need to step into the world he lived in, a world far from peaceful, far from certain. Wars, plagues, and unshakable doubt were the air he breathed, shaping every thought, every fear, every choice. It was a world that made certainty a luxury no one could afford. 17th century Europe was tearing itself apart. The 30 Years' War left cities in ashes and fields in ruin. Across the continent, Catholics and Protestants fought with a ferocity that made theology deadly. The old certainties, the medieval vision of a universe centered on God, were crumbling, leaving people adrift in a world suddenly unrecognizable, where nothing could be taken for granted. Galileo had peered through his telescope and revealed that the Earth was no longer the center of the universe. René Descartes had shut himself away, emerging with a mind that doubted everything but its own existence. Slowly, inexorably, the scientific method began to challenge divine revelation as the guiding path to truth, shaking the foundations of faith, authority, and certainty itself. Into this chaotic world stepped Blaise Pascal, a prodigy. He had invented a mechanical calculator at 19 and helped shape the foundations of probability in his 20s. Yet for all his brilliance, He spent his final years consumed by questions that no formula could solve. Questions of faith, doubt, and the fate of the human soul in a world suddenly unmoored. His most famous work, The Pensées, was published after his death, a mosaic of fragments and unfinished thoughts. What we now call Pascal's wager appears here, not as a polished treatise, but as a sketch, a thought experiment he wrestled with, probing the unknown, testing the fragile line between reason and faith. The logic of the wager is deceptively simple. You face the most fundamental question: does God exist or does he not? And you must decide how to live your life, either as if he exists or as if he does not. The striking truth is this: there is no escaping the choice. Even to refuse is to choose, and in that choice, your life is quietly and irrevocably shaped. So let's consider what the possible outcomes of this choice might be. If you choose to believe in God and it turns out that God does exist, then you gain everything: eternal salvation, infinite joy. The payoff is infinite. If you choose to believe in God and it turns out he does not exist, then yes, you may have surrendered Sunday mornings, certain pleasures, moments of indulgence. You may have lived with small sacrifices and quiet regrets. But these losses are limited, fleeting, the kind that fade with time. If you choose not to believe in God, and it turns out that God does not exist, then you've gained something: more free time, freedom from certain constraints. But again, these gains are finite. But if you choose not to believe in God, and it turns out he does exist, the stakes are unimaginably high. You risk everything: eternal damnation, endless suffering, a loss without measure. Unlike the small sacrifices of belief, this loss stretches beyond time, infinite and inescapable. Pascal, who had helped invent the very mathematics of probability, saw this as a decision made under uncertainty. And when you set the outcomes side by side, the math becomes stark. On one side, infinite gain; on the other, infinite loss. And what stands against them? Only finite gains, only finite losses. And here lies the force of his wager. No matter how vast a finite number may seem, beside infinity, it collapses into nothing. So the rational choice, according to Pascal's reasoning, is to believe in God. Not because you have definitive proof, not because faith comes easily, but simply because the stakes are asymmetrical. The potential cost of being wrong on one side of the bet vastly outweighs the cost of being wrong on the other side. This isn't theology in the usual sense. It's closer to game theory, the mathematics of risk and strategy, applied to the deepest question of all: how to live. Pascal treats faith not as doctrine, but as a wager, a calculated bet on existence itself, where every choice carries weight and every outcome matters. And yet there is something about Pascal's wager that always lingers uneasily. It feels too tidy for a question as profoundly messy and human as how we choose to live. Life isn't a ledger. It isn't a table of outcomes. It's chaos, risk, longing, and somehow Pascal asks us to fit it all into a wager. The first thing that warrants a pause is this: belief doesn't feel as cost-free as Pascal suggests. He presents it as if choosing to believe costs little more than Sunday mornings or a handful of worldly pleasures. But the truth is messier. Belief can shape the individual's desires, doubts, even their entire way of seeing the world. And that cost is far more subtle, far more real, than any calendar or indulgence can capture. Imagine a person who chooses to believe in God based on this calculation. Their entire life is now shaped by that choice. They attend services, follow rituals, submit to moral codes, sometimes in harmony with their heart, sometimes in quiet conflict with their deepest intuitions. Every day becomes an exercise in alignment, compromise, and constant negotiation between belief and self. If this person has children, they raise them in this faith, a faith they themselves adopted as a strategic hedge against infinite loss. They forego certain relationships or experiences that their religion deems inappropriate. They live with a particular kind of awareness that they are being watched, judged, that their nature requires redemption. For some, this life shaped by belief brings comfort, a sense of purpose, a quiet peace. But for others, the cost seeps into every moment, every choice, every longing, every doubt. It becomes part of who they are, the lens through which they measure their worth, their freedom, their desires. And suddenly, Pascal's idea of finite loss feels hollow, almost cruelly small, compared to the weight of a life quietly reshaped by a wager. Then comes the question that troubles the most. Pascal assumes a very particular God, the Christian God, who rewards faith and punishes doubt. But what if the divine is nothing like this? What if the universe, the sacred, or whatever lies beyond our understanding, does not operate on the tidy rules of reward and punishment? Suddenly, the wager feels fragile, even perilous, because the ground beneath it is unknown. What if the true understanding is found in Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, or traditions you've never even encountered? What if there are aspects of the divine that no human religion has accurately captured? If there are many possibilities, each with different requirements, then the wager becomes far more complex than Pascal's binary framing suggests. And this brings us to perhaps the deepest question. Can belief chosen as a strategy ever truly be genuine? Can faith born of calculation carry the warmth, the conviction, the doubt, the wonder that make it real? This is what is most jarring about Pascal's framing. His idea that something so profoundly human could be reduced to a wager. The wager assumes that belief is something we can switch on like a light, chosen neatly after weighing costs and benefits. But belief doesn't work that way. You cannot decide tomorrow to believe the earth is flat, no matter how useful or convenient that belief might seem. Faith, when it is real, arises from something far deeper, from lived experience, from conviction, from encounters that bypass reason and choice entirely.